know you guys haven't heard from me in a while. I was thinking earlier how both times I've taken a hiatus from my show, that it's been some kind of historical occurrence that's brought me back in front of the microphone. In 2020, it was COVID, obviously, and now in October of 2023, it is the ongoing generational conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. This is a subject that I have looked into, but I'm not even as well versed as I should be, and I would imagine that a lot of my audience isn't either. So, what I decided to do was bring someone on the show who is very knowledgeable on all of this. If you follow her on Instagram, which you should do, and if you watch her stories, she's putting people on game about a whole plethora of things. And, I've learned so much from watching her, and I think you guys will too. So, without further ado, I have Rose here with me. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Actually, she just came back from a fundraiser. She's been at all kind of protests, for Palestinians. So she's not just a mouthpiece; she makes her feet work too. So let's just dive into it. Just give us, because in the introduction I said, this is a generational, like this has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
So can you kind of give the audience a background on the history of this conflict?
Okay, so I will start on the year that Israel was actually created. Because
1947, right?
technically there was a lot building up to that moment with the Zionist movement, which started in the 1800s by Theodore Herzl. Now, fast forward to the 1940s. That is when the Zionist movement, the Great Britain, the United States, etc., worked to create the state of Israel. And by worked, I mean essentially create a massacre of the Palestinian people and expel them out their land. So after the Holocaust, there was a lot of anti-Semitism within Europe, and the Jews, the Jewish people there, the European Jewish people there, needed a safe place, and which I totally understand. They deserve to live in a safe space and be treated well, but not at the expense of other people's lives. Now, in 1940, it started kind of in 1945, but the official state of Israel was created in 1948. Now, they expelled the Palestinians out of their homeland, and the Palestinians who have been there for years and years, both Muslims, Christians, and Jews who lived there peacefully. They welcomed in the European Jewish refugees with open arms, actually. And then there was the takeover. This takeover is also called the Nakba massacre. And during the Nakba, they killed thousands and thousands and thousands of Palestinian civilians and forced the other ones out their homeland and then created the largest refugee population in the world. The remainder of the Palestinians who were able to stay have since faced over 75 years of persecution, oppression, civil rights violations, and much more. Beyond the Palestinians in Gaza, even the Palestinians in the West Bank as well, they face the same type of oppression, whether it's them still being killed regularly to this day, denied access to just basic human rights, whether it's food or medical care, extreme surveillance, military checkpoints, restriction of movement, and the continuous illegal Israeli settlement expansion, which is basically when the Israeli settlers decide, hey, I want your home, I want your land, even though it's rightfully the Palestinians, and they still continue to force them out their properties and land. So that's a little bit of a summary of what's been going on the past 75 years.
Right. So, can you fill the people in on how did we get to this current moment? Like, because one day I feel like we just woke up and, well, to people that's not,
Yeah.
in it like you, we just woke up and all of a sudden we see, Israel's been attacked and we see this and we're like, wait, like what's going on? But obviously it was,
It's been brewing.
it's been,
Oh,
exactly.
it's been
It's been
brewing.
brewing. So can you fill us in on how did we get to where we are right now?
Yeah. So, whew, one thing I'd like to point out when you mentioned earlier that this is an issue between the Israelis and Palestinians. I like how you phrased it, because a lot of news stations, whenever they're reporting on this, they say the Israel-Hamas war, which couldn't be more incorrect. This isn't even a war against Hamas at this point. This is a genocide on the Palestinian people and the civilians, majority who have nothing to do with Hamas. So on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israelis, civilians and military. Now, I will never, ever, ever condone any civilians ever being harmed. I don't care if they're Israeli, Palestinian, I don't care who they are. No civilian should ever be harmed. I've never been a fan of Hamas. A lot of Palestinians aren't, a lot of Middle Eastern people aren't. I can get to that part later. But on October 7th, they attacked Israelis, both in military bases and then also at the music festival, and Israelis that lived in the illegal Israeli settlements. Now, the number of deaths is quite questionable. Can also get to that part later. But they killed civilians, and that's not okay. But Israel's reaction is not okay either. Now, as far as the Hamas attack, there's a lot of questions and concerns that were raised that the media is not even talking about. But about 4 days prior to Hamas attacking the Israelis, Egypt, who does have a peace treaty with Israel, provided intel to the Israelis that Hamas was planning an attack. They provided them the intel, the knowledge. So keep all this in mind. Israel has one of the most powerful militaries in the world, the best smart weapons defense system in the world, a surveillance system like no other, where Palestinians could not even take a step without Israelis knowing about it. So they have the intel, they have the capabilities of stopping it. How did that happen? Hamas, a very small militant group, which quite honestly, they're pretty pathetic. I'll be honest with you. They're nothing compared to the Israeli military.
Right.
How does this homegrown militant group get past all of that? They have Israel has yet to show us any CCTV footage of Hamas getting past some of the walls, which is very odd. But then to see Hamas militiants come down slowly, it's not even quickly, slowly on hang gliders and parachutes to the ground. How did that happen? How did also majority of Israeli civilians, adults, have all either served in the IDF military currently or formerly? So these are all people who have been military trained. So Hamas got past all of this. How? That's impossible without there being some kind of coordination with the Israeli Prime Minister and the military to allow this to happen for certain political gain. Now, on top of that, the music festival where Israeli civilians were killed was only 2 miles away from Gaza. Gaza is an open air prison with even before October 7th, with some of the worst humanitarian crisis situations and human rights violations in the world. One, let's say there was no threat from Hamas. Why would anybody have a festival next to an open air prison? I can never imagine going to a party just down the block from an open air prison that's essentially like a concentration camp. Who would, in my consciousness would not let me. Right. I would not feel good about that. So that's very strange in the beginning, but that's another story. But for Israel to allow a festival to happen 2 miles away from a pending threat is wild. It's wild. And then Israel has yet to answer, why did it take the military 6 hours to respond to the festival attack? Netanyahu prior to this was already losing so much support from his people. He was standing on his last leg. It was just one more thing, he was out the door. This unified the Israelis through hatred and fear, and he essentially, in my belief, used his own citizens as pawns for a greater political gain, because now the whole country is backing him. There are some people who still don't, of course, but it kind of forced them into supporting him, and it forced them into supporting him, and also for countless people to allow a genocide to happen now, because now the Palestinians have been dehumanized even more, and their deaths just don't matter. Right. So I think that's something a lot of people need to think about, including Israelis and Israel supporters, is that how is this? This was not just a mistake; it was far greater than that. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu used his own people as pawns.
Right.
So
I told y'all that this woman knows her stuff. I mean, that okay. So, it's one thing for somebody like me. When I won't even say me because I do know someone that lives in Israel, but somebody who is just observing this from behind the lens of social media that has no direct connection to what's going on. It's only so much you can feel. You know what I mean? Like you can try to be empathetic, but it's not at your front door. For you, and I'll just read something that you sent me. This is like at your front door, literally. Not only is it, your people, but also it's literally your people. Because he texted me, he was like, one of my good friends in Gaza is in critical condition. Another one I've lost contact with, and I don't know if they're even alive. So honestly,
they're not alive anymore.
Wow.
That one. This is I've texted you. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. So yeah, you this is there for you.
Yeah.
So can you talk about, if you're comfortable speaking on it, the effect that not only just the human side of it, but also the personal side of it for you?
Yeah. So, oof. Besides being a Middle Eastern person, I'm Egyptian, so this is happening at our border.
Right.
I identify with the Middle Eastern community heavily. I mean, they have names like mine and my brothers and my daughter and my family. We share, a similar culture, and this is happening on my homeland country's border. Because of my involvement in Palestinian activisms for over 10 years, I have met so many amazing Palestinian people who have become my friends. Some who are journalists and reporters who are American citizens too, but often go back to Gaza and the West Bank to visit their family and to report on what's going on there. One of those ones is one who was killed. Another one, she's recovering but not doing well. It's, yeah. It's infuriating. It's heartbreaking. I don't think I've slept more than 4 hours a night the past 2 weeks. I see these people and I see myself. I see my family. I watched a video the other day of a little boy who was killed, who had the same name as my brother Yusuf. His name was Yusuf, and the family found out their son was killed, and they also had another son who was Yusuf's little brother. And I have two brothers, Yusuf and Wassam. Wassam's the youngest. Yusuf is the middle child. And the little boy sees his dead brother, and just is screaming, "Yusuf, wake up! Yusuf, wake up!" And the father is just screaming in agony. The mother screaming in agony. And every time I heard like Yusuf, I just thought of my brother. Every single time. It hits home directly, and I am also aware, maybe I'm not Palestinian. Actually, I'm technically like 5%, but it's a different story. Well, I might not be like fully Palestinian. I relate to these people. These people are my people, no matter what. These are my people. These are my brothers and sisters. Right. And I also know that Israel's plan is not to stop with the Palestinian people. They have their greater Israel map that they're trying to create, and that's expanding into Egypt and taking away parts of Egypt as well. Right. And even then, I've always asked people, even if you can't relate to these people, you can relate to them in the sense that we're all humans, and this is an active and ongoing genocide. And we think about history and the times where atrocities have happened, from the Holocaust to slavery, and you wonder what you would have done then. Well, now is the time to show what you would have done. It's just, lean into your humanity.
Right.
So,
not only has this hit you personally with, your friends that are losing their life, but it's also hitting you when it comes to backlash.
Ooh.
And you being as outspoken as you are on social media, you've been receiving a lot of hatred. Can you dive into that and what's that been like?
It's
And
almost
do
like
you ever? Because I always question, not question, but I always wonder, because I look at your stuff all the time, and I always wonder, do you have fear?
um no, not anymore actually. I used to. Um again, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I've been getting threats off and on for 10 years. In the beginning it used to scare me. I think now I don't know if numb to it is a good word, but it actually just honestly just radicalizes me more. Like their attempt to silence me, their attempts to scare me just makes me want to go harder.
Right.
Now, I also know majority of them are keyboard warriors, but I also from personal experience know they're not just some of them are not just keyboard warriors.
Right.
The threats and some of the comments I've gotten, hateful is an understatement. Some of the most like sadistic things. It's I mean some of these things are not even stuff I'd be even comfortable repeating, but no, it doesn't scare me. I kind of just I laugh at them, and maybe that's just my way of coping with it. I'm not sure, but no, they don't scare me, and it doesn't silence me, and it won't make me stop. I wish these people doing it realize like you were just making me want to go harder. Like I don't like people like you, so I'm going to fight against people like you. And it's very just odd because not just odd, it's actually very predictable of them. I have condemned Hamas and Israeli civilians being harmed countless times. But no matter what, just my support for the Palestinian civilians and speaking up against a corrupt Israeli government is enough to rile these people up and make them feel comfortable with threatening me. I've heard everything from like, we're gonna kill all Arabs, all of you guys, and feed your body to the pigs and piss on your carcasses. I've been threatened to be essayed. Like I'll censor myself with that. Yeah, it's about chopping off my body parts even. Like it's like filthy comments.
Right.
So it's been 10 years of it though. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
Y'all ain't scaring her
keep it
no
going.
more. She say, y'all got Twitter fingers.
Yeah.
So one thing that I am vehemently against and that I hate about the internet is that the internet lacks context. The internet has a lot of misinformation. So it's even like videos on Twitter of bombings, and these bombings happened like years ago, but it's being presented as if it happened current day, and people see that because everybody's lazy, and nobody wants to go do their own research, so they see that like, oh, you saw that, it's true. I saw it on Twitter, it's true. Nobody really fact checks anymore. So, can you talk about having to navigate, because you're a person that's trying to educate people, your followers, on what's going on, but you're having to combat all these
all the
people who are
misinformation.
just doing things for clicks and to go viral or whatever, but it's not real information.
Yeah.
So can you talk about trying to combat the misinformation of the internet?
So the misinformation is insane. It's insane, especially because we do have, Western media stations perpetrating one side, and it's not just one side, but blatantly spreading lies. Our own government, our own CNN, Fox News, BBC news reporters, journalists just completely lacking integrity and the journalism process of fact checking. So we already have that, and then we have the internet,
Right.
where anyone can say anything, and people will run with it. Just run with it, and people who are
Especially, I don't mean to interrupt you.
yeah, they're good.
But here's the thing. People will ignore the truth if a lie supports
Their
narrative.
Absolutely. Woo. They love that. They love that. And they'll just blatantly deny the facts and truth that's presented to them Be like, well, that's not true. I'm like, you can literally go verify it yourself, but they just will insist that it's not true when there's evidence to support it because it doesn't support their narrative. Now,
Right.
when it comes to even the things I share, I'm careful about what I share because I want to make sure it's correct. 'Cause I also don't want to mislead people, and I don't want to provide people with information and then they go share it and they're wrong and then they look like a fool too.
Right.
So I make sure what I post, I go through like a fact checking process and make sure my sources are credible. But a lot of people don't do that, and a lot of people just it's like clickbait for them, and a lot of people are also very easily influenced. So when they see their favorite celebrity or athlete or whatever, being like, "Oh, I stand with Israel," but not knowing this athlete and celebrity was paid by Israel.
Can I ask you about that though?
Hell yeah.
I don't want to interrupt your thought, but you just gave me a thought. I didn't even have this in my notes. These celebrities
Fuck them. Excuse my language.
posting these. I'll have respect for a celebrity that put out a more
Condemning like any civilians being killed.
right
Palestinian Israelis.
like that,
Yeah.
but to go straight on like
I stand with Israel.
that
Pray
is
for Israel.
crazy. And then what they do is cut off the comments. Like, nah, if you're gonna post that, keep them
Yeah,
comments on.
say it with your chest.
And get this heat.
Say
You know
it
what I
with your
mean? So
chest.
can you talk about? Okay, I don't want to, cause I have to.
Can we at LeBron James in this?
That's what I was talking
Adam.
about. I have to be balanced and be fair.
Yeah.
The guy has done great things.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Well, up until now.
Right. But
him.
here's the thing. Do I have this guy, you probably can't see him behind. No athlete should be compared to Muhammad Ali.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? This man
They don't make it like him anymore. They don't.
standing up for Palestinians, saving the hostages. I mean, this guy was just on a different level.
Yeah.
So to bring the conversation back, okay, we can talk about LeBron if you want to specifically talk
Adam,
about
Justin
him.
Bieber,
Like this,
all y'all. Like, I mean, there's so many, but
yeah, there's somebody you have respect for, LeBron.
LeBron, that one hurt because I'm like, are you for? I have your jerseys. I have hyped this man up so much, like, because he's done a lot for the community.
Right.
But at the end of the day, and I actually don't even really want to single out LeBron because it's a big problem that goes way beyond him. I want you to think about any time in history where you have seen political leaders on both ends of the aisle, influencers, artists, athletes, food bloggers, anybody who has power influence, all being on one side of things in any conflict in history. That is unheard of because there's always some division, whether it's through Black Lives Matter, like protests or COVID or anything. There's always a disagreement.
Abortion.
Exactly. There's always a disagreement.
Yep.
That kind of like collective one-sidedness for everybody, that should be a red flag.
It makes you think.
Because I mean, you should think for a reason. Because there is proof. There's
Yeah.
proof behind it. There is proof that Israel pays artists and influencers to support them. AIPAC, which is AIPAC, is ahead of all of the major Western media news stations. AIPAC is very pro-Israel. It's a Zionist organization. And then politicians. You know how many politicians and of our elected leaders have dual citizenship with Israel? How many of them have Israel in their pockets? They do as Israel says. Like I don't know if can I cuss on here?
You can.
Okay. America is like Israel's bitch. Yeah. Like period. Like they're Israel's bitch. Israel has an immense amount of power and influence worldwide. They absolutely do control Hollywood. They control our government too.
Yeah. So going back to, not really going back to this, but you said one of your friends is in critical condition. The other one, unfortunately, passed away in Gaza. So what is the current state of things there right now?
It's a death camp. There's no other way to put it. The Palestinians in Gaza, which is about 2 million, 1 million whom are children, are trapped in Gaza. There's no way of getting out. And Israel, it's been about 2 weeks now, Israel cut off all access to their food, water, and electricity. carpet bombing the hell out of Gaza, claiming that they're targeting Hamas, but they've killed over 2,000 children. Hamas makes up less than 1% of the population in Gaza. And so the majority of people are civilians. They're bombing entire residential areas. They're bombing UN schools. They're bombing mosques and churches. Christians, they're bombing churches, in case you guys need to know about that.
I saw that one was like a very historical.
Yeah, it was the third oldest church in the world, and they bombed it, and they killed Palestinian children in the process. They're bombing hospitals, and I know they try to deny this last hospital attack, but Israel has a history of bombing hospitals that spans years, and I'll get to that part later too. But Israel 100% bombed it, but the media is trying to spin it as it wasn't them. But we all know the media lies.
Right, of course.
But the death count, I mean, it just keeps rising. Like as I'm talking right now, another child was probably just killed. And that's like chilling to think about. Babies, young children, teenagers. The videos I've seen, I don't think I can ever unsee it. I mean, I've seen babies with their heads blown off, kids with limbs missing, mothers screaming in agony as they're holding their dead child, kids crying over their parents' dead bodies. It's like the kids they don't kill, they've orphaned them by killing their family. It's like you're kind of, if you're there right now, it's like any second you can be killed. And Israel and
or
the
even
U.S.
if you're not murdered, you can starve.
Yeah, sorry. So if you don't die by the bombs, you can die by lack of food, lack of water. Hospitals are running without electricity. They ran out of medical equipment. They don't even have anesthesia, so they're having to perform life-saving surgeries without anesthesia. That's brutal, but they have to. They have no other option. They ran out of so much like crucial medical equipment. It's bad. I mean, that's not even a word. And U.S. is continuing to help with this through funding and sending Israel weapons. Like Israel's dropping U.S. bombs on children. On children. Every single day when we go to work, when we pay taxes, we are paying for a genocide. We give Israel $11 million a day in taxpayers' money, billions and billions of dollars of funding total. We are funding a genocide. We're funding human rights violations. We have blood on our hands as American citizens, whether we like it or not. And it's not going to stop unless, like, we the people do something. At the end of the day, these elected officials, we put them there. We put them there. So we have to force them to listen to us one way or another. And there's examples throughout the world of countries and the governments listening to the people, from Colombia to Spain, Ireland, Scotland. There are countries cutting ties with Israel. Now, I think it's going to be hard to get the U.S. to cut ties with Israel, but we can't just allow it to happen.
Right.
So
I found a interesting connection when you said that Israel bombed the third oldest church in history, and in that church were children. Very reminiscent of the civil rights era, Jim Crow, of when white people bombed black churches that had children inside of them. There has been this intersection of black struggle and Palestinian struggle throughout history, and I shared a video with you last week where it was Malcolm X talking about his stance with Palestinians. It was James Baldwin, his stance with Palestinians. Those of you don't know who James Baldwin is, he was a great thinker, writer, all that. Have his books somewhere behind rows. It mentioned Muhammad Ali and his stand with Palestinians, and it was a very insightful and informative video. But once again, you're probably more well versed in this area than me. So Do you care to expound on that intersection of the Black struggle and
Yeah.
the Palestinian struggle?
So, whew, Palestinian liberation goes hand in hand with Black liberation, and for many reasons. But one of those reasons is the common enemy of white supremacy. White supremacy is what started Israel in the 1940s. As much as they would like to say it was for a safe place for the Jewish people, if you really study Zionism and the creation of Israel, it has very little to do with that. Now, the dehumanization that the Palestinians and Middle Eastern people have endured is similar dehumanization tactics that have been used against Black people as well. And another person, you mentioned some great names, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Muhammad Ali, but then also Nelson Mandela.
Yep. Mandela, he was on there too.
And the South Africa apartheid regime is very similar to the Israeli apartheid regime, but even Nelson Mandela and his grandsons have said that even what Israel's doing is worse than what South Africa did. But the liberation of the Black South Africans, the Palestinians helped with this. Palestinian leaders helped with this. Nelson Mandela, I think up until 2008, was still classified as a terrorist by the United States. And that's what white countries, Western European countries, tend to do to Black and brown people when they resist, is to label them as terrorists. I think at the end of the day, when people have a common enemy, that itself, it just intertwines. We're fighting the same people. We're fighting the same evil at this point.
Right.
And that's kind of, I guess, a vague summary of how the Palestinian liberation, Black liberation is intertwined. During like the protests in Ferguson during 2020, Palestinians, organizations both in America and over there in the Middle East were very supportive of the BLM movement. They have always been, actually, but they were trying to help the protesters on how to deal with the tear gas. They were teaching them how to protect yourself from tear gas and how to treat yourself after like being exposed to tear gas. Every Black Lives Matter protest I've ever been to, there was the Palestinian groups there marching alongside them.
Right.
In South Africa, to this day, the leaders in South Africa, the Black South Africans, are very, very supportive of the Palestinians. And the African leaders, I mean, they probably have explained it in a way better than I ever could, but explaining the unity between the Palestinians and Africa and how important it is.
Right. Fannie Lou Hamer had a quote that said, "No one is free until everyone
It's free.
is free."
Mm-hmm.
So, expounding on that point about the intersectionality of Black struggle, Palestinian struggle, one thing that was vital in the civil rights era was protest. Actually, throughout history, period, protest has been a very instrumental part of progress for a marginalized group. You have been attending protests for a long time, actually, but specifically recently with for Palestinians. So when you're out there, you're protesting. What are you saying? What's the feel? What do you think is the role of the protest in a fight against injustice?
So, I mean, as you said before, there's a history of protests and how important it is for any important protests are and civil activism and civil disobedience is into revolution. It's honestly a requirement. That's the starting point, in my opinion. Protesting and even social media activism, anything that brings awareness is vital to any kind of revolutionary change because we can't change a problem that people don't know about. It's the first step. It always will be the first step. It's a step of many, though.
Yep.
And I can compare, like, in the past 10 years, again, like my involvement with Palestinian protests. In the very beginning, I mean, we had very low attendance, not really high attendance, and it was primarily just like Palestinians and Middle Easterns and Muslims. And then, flash forward to now, it's huge. We're talking like thousands of people, and not just in Houston, like protests all over the world, like millions and millions of people. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Right. And people who aren't just Middle Eastern, Palestinian, or Muslim, people of all ethnicities and religious backgrounds. I was marching alongside with Jews for Peace yesterday. The increasing amount of Jewish people around the world are standing against Israel even. And this has to do with people waking up, awareness being spread, people realizing there's a problem and we need to do something about it. And beyond the importance of protests in the process of a revolutionary change, it's also a sign of solidarity and support to the Palestinians there. And I can tell you right now, the Palestinians there who are going through this, they've talked about this, how much it means to them, and it gives them hope, and it gives them the motivation to keep on fighting as they see millions of people across the world fighting for them.
Right.
That in itself is enough for me to get out there, to know that I can give them hope to like live another day, to fight another day when they're literally going through a genocide. That and alone, I think should make anybody speak up.
Right.
But yeah, we're gonna keep on protesting. We're not gonna stop until the Palestinians are free.
What do you think is the next step? Because I feel like a lot of times we stop at protests a lot. You know, if you look at what Dr. King did, he led protest, but he also went to Lyndon B. Johnson, got the Civil Rights Act passed. Like this is like substantial, concrete, like things that came from it. Like he didn't stop at the protest, and even before he died, probably, which why he did die, get killed, is because then he was on to, helping everybody, and it was more economic. Actually, interesting enough, I forget the exact quote, but he was saying that he kind of led his people, black people, into the fire. He didn't say fire. Forget the exact quote, but he was saying that he wished he would have focused more on the economic aspect.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Exactly.
BDS movement.
Exactly. And so, but his brain was going to do more than just Jesse Jackson. I forget who he sued, but they boycotted his company. Then went to first you go outside, you make noise, but then you go inside the building. Yeah. You just don't stop at the protest. So what do you think? And it's a loaded question because there's so many
the answers. I got some.
So what do you think are the next steps beyond the protests?
Some of those next steps are already actively being taken. The protests bring awareness and show solidarity. By bringing awareness, you're also tugging the heartstrings of millions of people across the world. And this is where an organization called BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, comes into play. And this is a company an organization that's been around for a long time. And despite Israel's many attempts to silence them and stop them from pressuring U.S. elected officials to make BDS movements illegal in their states or banned from college campuses, it still hasn't stopped the movement itself. But boycott and divestment sanctions is, I think, kind of self-explanatory. But boycotting companies and large organizations such as Starbucks and McDonald's who support Israel and provide them with funding. I was just watching today that their stock is dropping, and it has to do with the boycotts right now. So fuck Starbucks, fuck McDonald's, but there's a long list of other places you need to say screw y'all because they're funding a genocide. But hurting their pockets, it does something because, if you can't if you can't bring out the humanity of people, then, you need to get at their pockets. And boycotting is one. Divesting, countries like Spain and Colombia, divesting and cutting ties with Israel is a big one. Sanctions, pressuring our government, our elected leaders, again, we put there to enforce sanctions against Israel to stop their war crimes. So that is taking place right now. The protests might be where it starts, and it's something that will continue to happen, but certainly not where it ends. We have to force our elected leaders' hands. We have to make them listen, and we aren't going to just make them listen by protesting, obviously. So we have to look at other methods of civil disobedience to enforce that. So that's a great way. Elections are coming up.
Speaking of elections coming up, you are a self-admitted Democrat.
Yeah, sorry. I'm conflicted at this point. I'm like, should I be an independent?
That's where I'm headed. So you see the president coming out and saying what he says, and we sending money there, and we're doing all this. What are your thoughts?
Um, well, although I did vote for Biden, it was a very much a vote against Trump. I wasn't ever a huge fan of him. I'm a Bernie Sanders girl, hardcore. I love Bernie. That you cannot silence that man or stop that man, and he's always on the right side of things. Even right now, he is. But anyways, Biden is kind of a typical lifelong corporate politician, and fuck Biden. Fuck Biden. He's no better than Netanyahu himself, and Netanyahu is like the devil in my eyes. And he's Biden is an admitted Zionist. He's always has been. So no, I will not be voting for him. Although my values are very progressive values, it's really hard for me to align with the Democratic Party at this point anymore because they aren't even who they say they are. They don't align with my progressive values. And a lot of politicians, again, on both sides of the aisles are just sellouts. We have a few good ones, but it's just a few. And it's honestly really making me want to go back to school and study political science and run for office myself one day, but we'll see. Because I'm like, damn, y'all are not doing a good job. Let me go do it then.
Yeah, you should. Let me do it.
Let me do it, just because y'all are not doing it right.
Right. So you're going to vote for Cornel West or what?
Listen, no. Maybe. Anyway, I mean, I definitely never vote for Trump. Still fuck Trump. Trump would not be handling the situation any better. He probably would be giving Israel even more money and saying even more hateful rhetoric about Arabs and Palestinians. I think things would be way more chaotic with him. But it's like, evil is evil at the end of the day. A genocide is happening.
Right.
And Biden, our current president, and all elected officials are enabling it.
Yeah.
And supporting it.
Right. So to close, I asked a friend of mine to share some words that she might have had for you, but not even you specifically, just somebody on the opposite side because she grew up in Israel and just recently moved to the States about a year ago. Or no, about 3 years ago, I think.
I'm going to read it while you're saying it so I can
Okay.
I'm better at reading things.
So she said, "Thank you, Khyrie. This is my letter for them. I would like for you to read it so everyone could hear too, and I ask that you keep it anonymous for my safety." She says, "Hello, my friend. I am a Jewish girl born and raised in Israel. Before I am anything, I'm human. Everywhere I look around me, there is so much hate and division. I can't help but think, who benefits from this hate and fear? It's surely not me or you or our future children. I go online and I see my friends and families trying to honor our loved ones who were brutally killed, raped, kidnapped, and their words are being received as if they are supporting death of innocent people. I hear the pain and anger of the Palestinian people, and their words are being received as if they are terrorists. It's like no matter what you say, you're in the wrong. These days have been a nightmare, the worst anxiety, fear, and worry for my family that I miss and love so much. I know there is a Palestinian girl somewhere in the world like me who is feeling what I'm feeling, worrying and crying for her family, the worst pain. I'm writing this with tears. I don't have all the answers or the solutions, but I do want to say that I'm sorry. I am sorry for your pain. I was born in Israel. I didn't choose to, but I did, and I don't have another home. I also know that for hundreds of years, Palestinians were here, and I know they have another home. They don't have another home either. We keep paying the price of suffering that took place years ago, and this cycle doesn't end. I lost a childhood friend. She was burnt alive in the festival massacre. She was barely recognizable when they found her, barely hair on her head. I know there's a kid in Gaza who was born to the worst reality, seeing all the suffering and families being bombed. What did they do to deserve this? I pray they did not die for nothing. People in power and politicians have their own agendas, and I doubt they truly care for our lives. Mm-hmm. Many of us see it, and some are so hurt and angry they cannot think clearly right now. I pray our children won't carry this hate and that the world wake up. I pray people learn the truth. I will always be proud of who I am. With that being said, I know that beneath all identifications and ego, we are all one and the same. To that, you say what?
So one, I'd want to give her a hug because I mean I can tell she's hurting, and she probably has a good heart, and I empathize like with her pain. There's a lot in here I do agree with, and I think a lot of people actually would agree with, especially a lot of pro-Palestinian people. And there's a question that she said, though, where she said, I can't help but think who benefits from this hate and fear. It's surely not me or you or our future children, and she's absolutely right. So I do want people to think about who benefits from it. And she kind of mentioned later on, like, political leaders. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of this podcast about Netanyahu's and the Israeli government's being basically complicit in Hamas's attack because they had the intel. And why did also it take 6 hours for them to respond to the attack on the music festival? Israelis should be furious with their government right now because their government has used their own people as pawns. Now, when she says that she goes online and she sees her friends and families trying to honor their loved ones, they should be able to honor and grieve their loved ones. And that in itself, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is the people who are posting, pray for Israel, I stand with Israel, and only talking about the Israeli civilians who were harmed and making absolutely no mention of the Palestinian civilians that were harmed prior to October 7th and the ones currently being harmed. And when I say harmed, like killed. It gives off very one-sided, and it's playing into the kind of media's overall intention of just brainwashing people into just being pro-Israel and not giving a voice to the Palestinians. Those are problematic. People grieving their loved ones should never be an issue, though. Now, she says, like, no matter what you say, you're in the wrong these days, and I don't agree with that. And I think there is a right side and wrong side of things. If you're in the wrong, you're in the wrong. The right side of this is to stand against a genocide and ethnic cleansing of over 2 million people. There's no other side. Being neutral, standing with the oppressors. There's no symmetry between Israel and the Palestinians. There's a lack of symmetry. In other words, like the scales aren't balanced. Israel is way heavier, way more powerful, and then there's like the little Palestinians with very little power and influence. So when you have a world power killing thousands of people who have no power, there's no symmetry in this. So there is a right side and a wrong side. Being on Israel's side is not the right side. Being on Hamas's side is not the right side either, but Hamas is not the Palestinian people as a whole, and people need to understand that there's a difference. Now, she said that she misses her family and loved ones, and I sympathize with that. And she said, I know there's a Palestinian girl somewhere in the world like me who is feeling what I'm feeling, worrying, crying for her family, the worst pain. I slightly disagree with that. What the Palestinians are enduring is nothing. What the Israelis are enduring is nothing compared to what the Palestinians are enduring right now. It cannot even be compared. Cannot be even compared. Over 2,000 children killed in a matter of less than 2 weeks. Over 5,000 civilians. No, you can't compare the pain. Kind of just making sure I'm addressing every part of her message. She did recognize that, there's that Palestinians have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years prior, and they just want to be at their home. They have nowhere else to go. She said that she was born in Israel. She didn't choose to, but she did. And she doesn't have another home, but she does because America is her home. And majority of Israeli citizens are citizens to the United States and the UK. And they have most of them have dual citizenship. So they do have another home. Mm-hmm. That's a lie. I'm sorry. Palestinians do not. They don't even have citizenship in their own homeland. And they don't have anywhere to go because they're trapped in Gaza. Majority of Israelis are not indigenous to the land because a good percentage of the Israeli population are Ashkenazi Jews, which are European Jewish people. They have no ethnic ties to the land. The Palestinians do. The Palestinians have always been ethnically tied to their homeland. They're the indigenous people. these white Jewish people are not. This is not their homeland. Now, other Jewish people, brown and African Jewish people, okay, it actually depends on which like line of Judaism, line of Jewish ancestry they fall under. But Ashkenazi Jews, which makes up a lot of Israel, they're not indigenous. So that's another thing. But she can't go somewhere else because, again, she's in America now. She said she lost a childhood friend that was burnt alive in the festival massacre, and that is awful. I relate to her with that because I've lost my friend too, and I have another one who's not doing well. If I was her, I would be furious with Israel because, again, how did they allow Hamas to do that when they had the intel, they had the power, they had everything to stop and prevent it? And then why did they not respond to the festival attack for 6 hours? That anger and that grief your friend feels right now, it needs to be targeted towards the right people. Her friend was used as a pawn, and that's awful. She said people in power and politicians have their own agendas, and I doubt they truly care for our lives. She's absolutely right. And I'm glad she recognizes that, and I hope more Israeli people recognize that. She did mention that some of us are just so hurt and angry we can't even think clearly right now, and I sympathize with that as well. There's so much I want to cover, and say I can't even get to it. Like, okay, I did mention how I don't like Hamas. I didn't really dive into why, because I just can't right now. And a lot of Palestinians who are in Gaza, even who don't like Hamas, can't even really address the issue of Hamas because they have a greater powerful force against them, and that's Israel. She said, I pray our children won't carry this hate and the world wakes up. I agree with her. I pray people learn the truth, and I agree with her. That also means that, our media stations need to stop being so pro-Israel. She said, I will always be proud of who I am, as she should. Absolutely. Like, she should be proud to be Jewish. With that being said, I know that beneath all the identifications and ego, we're all one and the same. And I think I would give her a hug right now. Reading it almost made me cry. I sympathize with her. There's only a few things I disagree with. There's a lot of Jewish people that I personally know and have marched with who are on the right side of this. They're against the Israeli government and they're for the Palestinian people. Yesterday at the protests in Houston, we marched alongside Jews for Peace, which is a Jewish organization, a worldwide organization that's standing up for the Palestinian liberation against the Israeli government. So, I would love to bring her onto our side. I'd give her a hug right now, have her introduce her to the Jewish Voice for Peace organization, and they can guide her through it too. Mm-hmm. But I respect what she said, and I hope her and her family are able to grieve and they're able to heal. And I do hope we come to a solution one day. I don't think it's going to be today, though, obviously, or tomorrow.
Right. I want to thank you for coming on the show and educating the audience and me on this subject. I want to leave the rest of the show. I want to give you space to say any last remarks you might have for us.
My ring. Can you pause it real quick? My ring just got caught in my hair. Or not. It's okay. Just take that part out. Okay. So there are a few questions that I want to ask to any pro-Israel Zionist or anyone who's kind of on the fence right now. Because right now, so far, nobody's been able to answer these questions I'm about to ask. So this is one I did ask earlier, but I'm going to repeat it again. Why did it take 6 hours for the IDF to arrive at the music festival? 2, where is the CCTV of Hamas coming over the wall and taking the 200 hostages? 3, why throw over 10,000 bombs and destroy buildings and just carpet bomb Gaza when there are 200 hostages at risk? What about your people? Number 4, Israel has alleged that there was 1,400 Israelis killed by Hamas. They have yet to differentiate who were civilians and who was the military, but a lot of them were like IDF soldiers. Most of them were not civilians, but 1,400 is the number they gave. Where is any coverage of these funerals? Because I can tell you right now, Palestinians have coverage of the thousands that have been killed. I haven't seen much coverage of any Israeli civilian funerals. Now, there has absolutely been Israeli civilians killed, but I don't believe it's the 1400. I don't believe it's 1400. A couple other questions is, why is Israel killing people in the West Bank where Hamas doesn't exist? If Hamas is the issue, they've increased the attacks against the Palestinians in the West Bank. Again, Hamas has no authority there. Hamas, another question. Hamas was created in the 1980s. Why have they been killing Palestinians since 1940s? Still another question no one can answer. A couple more just questions real quick. What are your thoughts on the Prime Minister of Israel referring to the children of Gaza as the children of darkness? And in the same tweet saying this is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. I don't think I can get more racist than that. Calling the Palestinian children the children of darkness is wild. Yeah. I think, let me make sure I don't have any other more questions for them. Oh yeah, okay, last one. Oh, maybe two more. Why would a concerned government cut off supplies, cut off water, food, electricity, etc., when there are hostages, Israeli hostages that are still being held there? If this whole thing is about, rescuing their hostages back and attacking Hamas, why wouldn't they want better conditions for their own people who are stuck in Gaza? They don't even care about their own hostages. In fact, there's been reports of the IDF military, quote unquote, accidentally shooting and killing some of the hostages. Now, I think these are all questions that pro-Israel people need to ask themselves, because, they're not going to have a logical answer. You can't. Now, there's probably 100 more questions I could ask where Zionists and pro-Israel people cannot answer, at least not with a straight face. But those are a few. And I would just like to finish off with one last message to American citizens, taxpayers. If you think the genocide Israel is committing on the Palestinians is just another problem in the Middle East and will not affect you as Americans, let me be the one to tell you, you are absolutely wrong. An ongoing genocide left unchecked is a genocide that is normalized. When we normalize something so evil, we give it the room to spread like the disease it is. So do not be surprised when that disease shows up to your doorstep in one variant or another. And let us not forget that the U.S. taxpayers' money funding this apartheid regime and genocide, there's billions and billions of dollars a year of our hard-earned money that is being sent to an apartheid regime. An apartheid regime that, according to the UN, has committed over 70 war crimes and regularly oppresses, beats, kidnaps, kills innocent civilians, and has been doing so for over 75 years. And now this barbaric entity is actively using our money to commit a genocide to over 2 million people, 1 million who are children. Meanwhile, as America funds this genocide, our own U.S. citizens are suffering, and the U.S. is in trillions of dollars of debt. We have a rising homeless population, millions of children who face hunger and food scarcity, college graduates who are drowning in student loan debt, and many more examples of American suffering. To add insult to injury, since 1995, Israel has had top-notch free healthcare that has been funded by the U.S. tax dollars. Meanwhile, American citizens struggle or even die because they cannot afford crucial medical care. But to be honest, the fact that we give money to Israel shouldn't be the driving factor for you standing against them. Your humanity should be the driving factor. I urge anyone listening to this to lean deep into whatever humanity you have left in you and stand up for what's right, and stand up for the Palestinians. That's it.
That was beautiful. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Hopefully you guys will be hearing a lot more from her. Can you tell them where they can follow you on Instagram and so they can see all your great stories like I get to see?
Yes. So my Instagram is EgyptianRose_, just like EgyPTIAN ROSE_ on Instagram. My Facebook name is written in Arabic, but my link to my Facebook is on my Instagram too. But Instagram is mainly where I post.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for listening.